Okay, everybody, welcome back for another video. I'm going to do something a little bit different today. Well, not different, I guess, but a little bit away from the three before that I did there on the, or at least the last two I did on the Sculpins. Do something a little bit more along the lines of a traditional streamer look, at least, but at the same time using materials that might not be particularly common to streamers, at least in this area. So I got the original here somewhere, so I'll show you that one first. So what I'll be tying is the what I called the black and white shiner, and that's the pattern here if you can see it. So a little bit about the pattern. I'm not sure when I first came up with this. I think it was originally came about as a result of a tandem pattern, which I'll be tying later on, I'm sure. But that's where the color scheme came in. And again, there's not much color in it. Of course, just black and white. But at the same time, the tandem was very successful. And so I kind of, from that tandem version, had the inspiration to create a single hook version. And what I'm using in here, just the explanation of materials, again, is a pattern description at the beginning of the video. But the body is a tubing material, and all these streamers in this series, and again, as I go through these videos, you're going to see a lot of them, but they're all tied with a common body choice, and that is this tubing. This particular tubing is called an MFC tight weave, but they no longer make this, so I'm currently using up the stock that I do have, and then I'm going to be looking for something else. And there's a few other brands out on the market, and I'm sure I'll find something that's suitable. But anyway, that's the body tubing. This particular one in black is called a pearl black tubing. The throat and the underbody is just a white goat, and then the red throat, which is a red ice wing material. The wing is probably the unique part about the fly in terms of material choice, and that is it uses what they call Nayat here, or by the brand name of Snow Runner. I think is more popular as a tube fly material, but it's sort of it is known as more of a big fly or big streamer type material. And first, when I started experimenting with it a little bit, I found that I liked it as an alternative to bucktail. There's nothing wrong with bucktail, of course, and there's a lot of streamers out there that utilize bucktail, but I found this Nayat here, although it is more expensive, I like the profile it gives. It gives a very heavy streamer look, which is what I was going for on these big streamers. It takes there's a little bit of prep work to it, and I'll explain that as I go along here, and as I get into the tying, I'll mention that, and I can probably provide another video later on of how I prep this. Is not very complicated, and there is videos out there. Just search under Nayat here or Snow Runner or prep, and you'll find it. How they comb it out and how they use just a steam iron on a steam setting to straighten out the hair. Even when it's so-called quote-unquote straight, it's still kind of a crinkly look, which I don't mind. So over the top of the Nayat here, I'm using a goat, and it's hard to tell in here, but it is. I don't use a lot of it, but I like this particular is a vineyards goat here, long goat here, which I think is probably a Himalayan goat, but it has a sort of a shine to it that I haven't been able to find with other brands other than the vineyards product. But I'm sure there's products out there that'll be fine as a substitute. There are others out there that doesn't have that same, like I said, that same luster, and I've kind of stuck to this to the vineyards goat, and I'll mention that as I get through it as well. So there's some flash in here, and there's flash over the top and peacock over the top, and of course the eyes. Now what you're going to notice if you keep watching these videos that I'm using or doing related to streamers, at least, I'm a big lover of eyes on streamers. There's not many streamers I tie that don't have eyes on them, and since the introduction of UV, it's made this application of eyes and the head assembly just so much more easier, of course, than back years ago when I used to do these in epoxy and put them on a turning wheel and have them drying and all that stuff. So now it's just, and again, I get into that in a second, or you know, when I get to that stage. But it's just a tape eye, 3/32 on these streamers, and overcoat it with UV product. And like I said, I'll explain that as I go. So without any further ado, let's get started, and we'll tie out one of these, and I'll explain, hopefully cover all the steps as I'm going. And again, this is not a difficult fly to tie by no means. And hopefully you'll see a few different techniques that I use. Nothing complicated, but I don't see them typically on a lot of traditional streamers. But anyway, that's the way I do it. So let's get going. So the hook that these are tied on is a Mustad hook. There's nothing fancy about it. You can tie them on other brands. I happen to start with a Mustad and stuck with it. It's a 94720, which is a 9X long, 2 extra heavy hook. And most of my streamers are tied on a number 4. You can tie them bigger or smaller, of course, whatever your preference. But many of them I tie for stock anyway, for the store, is tied on a number 4, sort of a mid-range that I find good. So that's the hook here. Like I said, it's a 9X. Now you can use, like I said, there's lots of other brands out there, I'm sure, that would do a nice job of this. Like I'm sure the Partridge Heritage streamers, I've been tempted to switch over to those, but again, I got a lot of these Mustad 9X hooks available, so I'm going to use up what I have, and I've never had any complaints on this particular hook, like for bending or breaking or anything like that. So that's what we're going to tie on today. So the thread is a UTC 70, just a common thread, and we'll start by laying down a base of thread. I usually lay a base of thread over the whole hook shank. So many of the traditional streamer patterns that you'll see in books, and a lot of the bucktail streamers, I mean, beautifully tied, nice and neat heads, tied with very slim bodies, tinsel or otherwise. I kind of got away from a lot of that. Nothing wrong with it. I tied a lot of feather wing streamers over the years as well, and tied them that way. But this here, the way I'm doing these, I consider them a much stronger alternative, and probably a little simpler, I think, at the same time. So on these flies, and on pretty much all my streamer flies, I like a body that's a little bit heavier than, say, on a bare hook shank. So I don't tie the material over a bare hook shank. What I use as an underbody, and again, you're going to see me use this a lot. You can use all kinds of materials for underbodies. I use an Antron, and I happen to, and in this particular pattern, I use a dark hue, like a dark tint. And this particular one's an olive. And then on the silver bodied streamers, I use a white. So I happen to have it on a skein, just again for bulk purposes, and saves me a few bucks buying it this way. But you can buy it by package. And again, you can use other types of underbody material. Antron is probably a little bit more an expensive alternative, but that's what I got used to using, so that's what I stuck with. Now, anybody who's used Antron will know that it's not particularly simple to work with, particularly if you got rough hands. It's just a series of multi-strands, of course, and it has a tendency to separate out on you, and you hooks in your hands and things like that. But if you be careful, and there's a few little tricks that does help you. So tie in the Antron, a few wraps to hold it, and again, want a manageable quantity. Not that it's too long so you can't manage it, but at the same time, enough there you're going to cover this long shank hook, which is quite, like I said, it's a quite lengthy hook. So you wrap this in as an underbody. Now with Antron, what you're going to find is, if anybody has used it like this, it has a tendency, like I said, to separate sometimes on you. So, you can see it almost separating there now. If you a little trick you want, just wet your fingers and just do a little bit of a twist. And then as you're rolling, twist it a little bit. Don't twist it too much or you get it, almost like a knot. But if you twist it a little bit, it will prevent the sort of the splaying of the antron. Then when you get it back on track, you go again. So what you're after here is, you know, this is covered by the body tubing material, so it's not, doesn't have to be perfect. It's not like you're covering this with tinsel, but at the same time, you don't want big bulks, big knots into it or whatever. So I tied up so far as the opposite the point of the hook, and you wrap back. Get back to the tie-in spot. I usually, and again, you're going to see me do this a lot. I do it with a lot of my flies, and again, it's more thread control. Why put on a lot more thread when you don't need to? I back off some of the wraps of my own, of the previous thread. Don't back off too many, but back off enough that, well, you just don't need them there at the head, right? So turn this off. There we go. That's it. So let me just tie this off. So that's the underbody. So the tubing that I'm using, like I told you, like I said at the beginning, there is a UTC tight weave tubing, it's called. Like all tubing, is just with a yarn core in the middle of it. This happens to be this. Like I said, this it's got a better weave into it, and again, it's stronger and it holds together better. Some of the tubing materials has a tendency to really separate. So the tubing supplies or provides the body material as well as the tail. So the tail on I usually extend the tail fairly long. So the tail, say, goes out to just beyond the bend of the hook, and the tubing needs to go back to the eye. So that's about enough to cut off. So just pull out the core. And what I do is I take your scissors or take a pair of tweezers and just splay the ends. Thread this back on. There you go. So I tie this tubing down opposite the hook, opposite the point, with a fluorescent red UTC 140. It creates a little bit of a hot spot there at the end. So the way I do this is just a couple of loose wraps in order to trap the thread. Once you got it trapped, tighten it, and then wrap over itself. So what you want to do is you want to cover up the antron underneath. So you want to go far enough ahead to cover it up. That's good. And just tie this off with a hand whip finish. That's it. So to accentuate that red, to brighten it up a bit, I use a UV fly finish in a hot red color, and I found it really makes that point this here pop sort of on the fly. Now I use red commonly for a lot of these streamers on this point, but you can get it in other colors, and be interesting to try some different other colors with some different, depending on the pattern overall color, you know. So just give that a shot with UV light. That's it. Okay, now you tie your thread back in again. Now what you want to do, obviously, is keep this tubing tight. And the antron underbody provides a bit of structure to the body underneath, so you're not crushing it at all. And this tight weave is a small. I forget the millimeter diameter, if it's a 3 millimeter, or no, it's smaller than that, I believe. Anyway, it's in the small. So as you'll see, if your head is going to start basically maybe two eye lengths back from the eye of the hook. So what I do is I roughly judge that. Now if I put it at 2, I'm gonna pull the head too far, so I kind of come back a little bit. A couple of loose straps to trap the thread. Take your tubing and then push it forward, and then tighten it. Now you got a nice tight body. Trim that off. And then trim these fibers close to the eye of the hook. Not really one there. I usually tie with a back plate. Of course, I can't do that with the camera, so I find it a little more difficult to see. For anybody that hasn't tied with a white background or some kind of a back plate, I suggest that you try it. I think you're going to find it. I think you'd find it a lot easier. So that's it for that part. What you can do here, I'm not going to do it on this fly because I don't want to wait for it to dry. Usually I coat this with just a normal head cement, something very thin, a thinned out loon or a thinned out basic Pro Lacquer, various other brands you can get just to kind of seal up the body. But it's like I said, it's very strong. Okay, so now what we're ready for is basically the underbelly. And the underbelly is in all my streamers pretty well is white. What I'm using for this is like I said, is that Vineyards coat that I mentioned to you that has that what I consider to be a nice sort of sheen to it. Now this comes in fairly it's lengthy and it's fairly pricey, so I try to make the most out of it where I can. So it's almost like, you know, the length will give me almost 2 throats or 2 underbellies, and I don't put very much on the hook anyway. So what we can use is a bit of this cut down material. Just pull out the under fuzz there that's in this. And again, you can keep this very, very sparse, right? So as you can tell, it's chopped off square, so just, you know, just kind of pick it out a little bit, make it look a little bit less of a squared off look. And you can, like, you know, take your scissors in here. Just trim it out a bit if you wanted to. Okay, that's plenty. All right. What you're also going to see me use here quite a bit is wax. For a couple of reasons. The obvious one is it helps grip the material, and this goat is a little bit slick. But also on these particular streamers, well, almost all my streamers, unlike a lot of streamers that you're going to see tied, you know, more of a traditional look, is a very thin, very small head. On mine, I like the larger heads. I like the look of it. It also provides a much bigger base end for the eye as well. Okay, so the throat goes in here. Taper cut the hair. And tie your throat in. And that's it. That's all it's needed. No more to it than that. A little bit of red. And again, you're going to see me. I love the stuff, the Slice Wing, and you know, there's other brands out there, obviously, but I use this quite a bit for throats, particularly. I just got used to using it, and I kind of like it. It gives a nice shine to the throat. And it comes in many different colors. So the throat goes in. Don't worry about the length. 1, tighten down. 2, wrap over. 2, like that. Obviously that's a bit long. here. And I just kind of taper cut that. Okay, so that's done. So that's your underbelly and your throat. No more to it than that. Pretty simple. Next is your wing. And your wing is done in a couple of different stages. This is the Naiad here I was talking about, or Snow Runner. It comes fairly a lot more crinkly than this, and you can tell that I've straightened this. And I use, and again, I'll probably put another video out on how to do that if there's any interest. But what I use to do this really, so you can pick these up at a pet store if you wanted to. This is no more than I don't even know what it's actually called. It's some kind of a rake meant for, I guess, for long-haired dogs. So I use the rake to rake out the hair first and get some of the underfuzz out of it. Now a lot of it has already been removed, and that under hair actually makes decent dubbing as well if you want to keep it. I don't, but you can. And then this is a finer comb. This is a flea comb, again at a pet store. And this one I use quite a bit, and helps me you know, comb this hair out, get some of the underfur out of it. There we go. So again, this the other thing, this Naiad comes in two different lengths, a long and a short. This is a short, which for streamers of this size is fine. The long version, even for tandems, I find this is probably long, and this will do for even for tandems. But the long-haired version, again, for tandems or for you know, obviously a longer profile streamer, then you can use the longer here. And some of the two plies, no doubt, probably uses the longer here. So again, I use in two stages. You can do this fly kind of sparse if you wanted to. What I've been doing in recent years is tying them fairly heavy. I just kind of like the look of it, but it's really a personal preference. I like the heavier look on these, so I do it two different stages. I use a clump, maybe that much, which seems like a lot, but there's a lot of underfur in here, and I'll show you in a second. So, cut that out. And you'll see it, even with me combing it out previously before I ironed it, you still don't get you know, it's still quite a bit of underfur in here. See? There we go. Okay. Maybe a little bit too much there for the first. There we go. Okay, so the length of this is just beyond the tail, slightly beyond the tail, so around that length there. So kind of gauge it, and then switch over to hands, and then pinch it where you want it to be. So right there. So pinch the hair right there, and you want to taper cut this again, but you want to taper back to where you just pinched it. So, pretty good. Again, some wax. I'm going to tie this in so the taper cut is right back to behind the eye. And crush that down. There you go. Looks good. So you got a nice, you know, a nice tapered head, right? For that one piece that you got tied in. Next, a little bit of flash, and this is where I use crinkle mirror flash in pretty well all my streamers. Again, a product that I seem to have sort of zoned in on and I've stuck to over the years. I just like the flash, and you don't need a lot of it in this, so I usually do about 3 strands. This particular color, I think, is a pearl black. And I change colors depending on the type of fly it is. So you tie it in, fold it back, tie it down, and then kind of just trim it off. That's it. Done. Okay, next step is another layer of Snow Runner. Now you can you don't have to do it this way. You can, if you want it sparse, you can tie in your goat here if you wanted to. But like I said, what I've been doing lately is tying wings that are slightly a bit heavier. Okay, same thing again, same process. Pinch, taper cut. Wax. Tie in. And what you're trying to do here is you're trying to build a sort of a nice tapered head as you're tying this material in, because it is bulky. If you tie it in and you don't want it squared off, and then you got a bump and your thread is riding over the bump, and you're putting a lot more thread on than you need to. And these heads are, like I said, are purposely big anyway. Okay, so that's the snow runners tied in. Now you can perfectly fine to leave it like that, and then tie off with your flash and your peacock curl if you wanted to. I go one step further, and I use the Vineyards goat in black. And again, I like the shine of it. And you can't use this on its own. Well, yeah, I guess I can't, but I wouldn't suggest building the wing out of this on its own, because again, it's a very limp material. But the Snow Runner provides a base, support structure for the Vineyards goat. So tying it over the top seems to work. Again, this is fairly long, so the way I do this is just grab the tip of the hairs, pull them, and then you can just line them up. And you don't need a lot. So just wet your fingers, pull out some of the stragglers. Probably half as much as what you would normally put on for the Snow Runner. And that goes over the top. Same process again, taper cut, a bit of wax. And this stuff is slippery, so the wax helps grip. Now you can tell that you don't rely on building up a fairly sized head with this. So this is not your delicate feather wing streamer heads that you'll see. These are fairly robust heads, nice big heads, big eyes. It stands out. So that's basically your wing structure for the most part. Then I finish this off with again, as you'll see me use it quite a lot, is this holographic Flashaboo. I don't use much of this in rainbow. I just use a few strands. And again, I'm just sort of zeroed in on this particular product. I use it in almost all my streamers to top them off. I just find this just gives a nice extra little bit of flash. And over you go. Trim that off like you're getting a haircut. Any stragglers, you can trim them out. And then the last piece of this, the last material to tie in, is peacock. And for the backs on all my minnows, I use a few strands of peacock. That's pretty typical for a lot of streamers. And, it's just the back of many of the natural streamers got that olive color to it, and I think that's where the peacock has always been a favorite, and it's used in many of these streamers. Use peacock curl. Now I take I don't know if I noticed, you probably didn't notice here, I don't use the straight herl, or the packaged herl I should say. I use it from the eyes. Okay, not sure. I find that the eyes, the herl on the eyes, particularly in some of them, if you get the longer eyes, they're a little more, they're flimsy, and they're much better alternative for a topping than a regular herl. Herl is much stiffer usually when you buy it, and it'll give you that straight look. I'm sure the fish don't care, but if you're like me, and I you know, tying these flies is more as much for me as it is for anyone, or as it is for the fish. Try to use stuff that, you know, makes it look pleasing to you. So I use about 3 or 4. In this case, I got 4. As you can tell, they're pretty straight. A quick little tip: if you want to get the sort of the herl to kind of adhere to the profile of a streamer, just wet your fingers, and then use your thumbnail a little bit. And as you ride your thumb through it, you're going to see it's going to curve on you. Now, some of them might sort of want to go their own way, but you can see it, huh? I don't know if I'm in the right camera view here, but you can see it's got a nice turn to it. So kind of lay those in. Lay them on top of the hook. Pinch wrap. Couple of turns. See, it's one gone straighter now. So you can if you want to, you can go back and do it again. There we go. Turn those off. And then finish off your head. Now, as you're finishing this head, you know, as you're wrapping the thread, don't wrap it all up in front, and then because what you'll find, you're going to create yourself a bump, and then as it rides down towards the eye, you know, it's going to create a sort of a cavity on you. So kind of even out your thread as you're going. And again, like I said, these heads are fairly big, but that's okay. And that's about it. So what we do is we whip finish. Good. Now, the last thing to do is eyes. On this particular pattern, I'm using red. Some patterns I use white, some patterns I use yellow. It's just a Wapsi stick-on eye. Again, like I said, on this size, I'm using a 3/32. So what they do is they come on a sheet. Just peel and stick. This is a holographic red. So what we do here is we fold it, pick off one on this side, one on that side. That's it. Last step, I usually tilt this fly up when I'm laying in the UV, so I don't have any tendency for the UV to flow down towards the eye. Although this UV that I'm using here, I'm trying to use up the rest that I have. Is just a bug bonds, some stuff that I had lying around. I'm trying to use it up, but it's fairly thick right now. It's not a whole lot left in the container here. Kind of coat the eye with a good generous coating of UV. And spread this around out. Now that other eye might cause me a little bit of problem here. Let's see now. Nope, looks okay. Once I set this now with the light, that'll be fine. Okay, good. So I hit this with the UV, and that'll set that up. Okay. One final step. Now, this particular UV, the Bug Bond Loon, it's got a tackiness to it. A lot of the other, not a lot, but some of the other UV products don't. I'm just trying to use up what I have. So because it's so tacky, I normally coat it with, excuse me, with a, this particular one I coated with our Sally Hansen Hard as Nails. This one I got from the dollar store, which is a little, about half the price of what you'd pay for it at a drugstore, but it seems to be a slightly different consistency to it, but it still works. So you don't need very much here. Just coat the head. And what happens, that'll dry, it'll crystallize the head almost, I guess, and it'll create that sort of glossy look, and it'll take away that tackiness. It doesn't take long to dry here, a few minutes and it'll be done. Essentially, you could do the same thing on the red here on the back, because if not, it gets it's a little bit of a dull look. You can use that same product on the back, and it kind of seals in that nice shiny look. I didn't do it on this particular one, but you can certainly do that, and I've done it on many of the other ones. So that's the black and white shiner. Again, not a complicated fly. You know, it uses materials that are not sort of typical, are not typical for many of the streamers that you see, you know, where bucktails used and whatnot. But using this Naiad here, like I said, or a Snow Runner, it's usually called Snow Runner, or it's always called Snow Runner. And the Snow Runner, as I said before, comes in a bunch of different colors, so you can, the colors that's available is quite extensive, so you can use it in any of your patterns, your streamer patterns that's calling now for bucktail, or if you want to convert them over to these, which is the approach I took. So I took many of the patterns that are traditional, like Mickey fins and black nose dace, 9 and 3s, magog smelts, all that, and I converted them all over using the Snow Runner here in place of the bucktail and other materials. So for instance, you know, this would be a magog smelt with the silver body. The head's not glued on this one yet, so you can still, it's got yellow eyes, it's not UV coated. But you can see the silver tubing, so that's the magog smelt. That's the Mickey fin. Again, is the same, so I use the same sort of recipe, really, I guess. You know, it's Naiad hair. It's your Snow Runner for your first layer, Snow Runner for your red. Over the top then is your Vineyards Gold in yellow. So I use the same sort of combination. And then there's a black nose. No, sorry, this one's a red and white. Same thing. White Snow Runner, red Snow Runner, then white goat, bit of peacock herl, simple fly, right? This particular one using silver eyes. Those eyes are slightly a bit bigger than the 332nd, but not much. Just happens to be a different brand. And again, you'll see on my site a bunch of different types of different other streamers, all tied basically the same way in terms of a combination of materials, just mixing up the colors. I found it works. A lot of success with it. This particular pattern, as is the Tandem, has been quite successful. One of the best probably streamer patterns I've ever used, and not just me. You know, I've had others use it a lot more than I have, you know, have caught not only just not only brook trout, but probably more so for landlocked salmon, it seems. It's very, very effective on landlocks. So that's it. I hope you enjoyed the video. Yeah, so you know, there'd be more of these streamers coming in the future, different color combinations, but you know, the method that I'm using will be the same. So that's why I wanted to share this one this time. The next couple of videos probably I'll get back into. I got some more scoping patterns that I wanted to show you. Ones that I've been tying for many years. It's been effective, both cone head versions as well as utilizing some other techniques on for heads, little different way of doing the heads. So we'll get into those in the coming weeks. So appreciate you watching. Please subscribe, and see you the next time. Thanks. Bye.